So you're thinking about buying a home up here in the Boise, Idaho area. But hold on, I want to talk to you a little bit about that massive lawsuit around realtors, the commissions, who was paying who, all of that fun stuff. This is extremely important. So if you want to learn how this impacts you here in Boise, go ahead and stay tuned. What's up guys? I'm Dolan, your Boise realtor. Welcome back to the channel. This video today is going to be a little bit different than most of the videos that we put out. It's going to be much more tactical. I'm going to walk you through some very specific things that you need to know if you're going to be buying a home here in Idaho in particular, but really nationwide. I do want to clarify that I am a realtor. I am not a lawyer. I am not an attorney. So I know a heck of a lot about how this all impacts us up here in Idaho. But when we're talking about the specifics from the lawsuit, how we got there, the terminology, everything like that, and how it impacts other states, if you have any questions at all, consult an attorney. That is not my realm. So be sure to go to the expert. I'm sure some of you have been paying attention to the news for the last couple of years, and you know exactly what I'm talking about when I mention this massive lawsuit across the country. And I also know that there's some of you that probably have another tab open right now, and you are frantically Googling, what the heck is this real estate lawsuit? Do I ever need to pay a buyer's agent? Do I have to start paying a buyer's agent? What the heck is going on? Both of you, I'm hoping that this video provides a little bit of value by breaking it all down and giving you some really tangible, tactical things to try and simplify it so that you know exactly what the heck you're getting into. At the crux of it, this lawsuit really had to do with the clarity and transparency around commissions and how agents, particularly buyer's agents, were getting paid. Both buyers and sellers weren't understanding exactly what was going into the process. They didn't know that commissions are totally negotiable. They always have been, always will be. On the buy side, in some states where buyer representation isn't even a thing, it's much more informal. They didn't even know that their agent was getting paid, let alone getting paid by the seller through the transaction. And then on the seller side, around the country, there were agents that just weren't doing a good job explaining to their seller exactly where that commission fee was going. A portion of that was going to the buyer's broker to get them, whoever is bringing that buyer to the home, to help offset that cost for the buyer. And when you look at all of these together, those are some massive issues that buyers and sellers around the country were starting to feel like they were getting swindled by the agents that they chose, which isn't good for anybody. It's also important to note that this was a national lawsuit. So states around our country, they all do real estate business very, very differently. So spoiler, moving up here to Idaho, you're making a good decision because we've been doing things much closer to the right way. So our forms changes, the way that we're doing business is really changing a minuscule amount compared to some states around the country that they never even had official buyer's agency. What does that actually mean for you though? Why should you be listening to me? We're gonna talk a little bit about the three major things that are changing and how they impact you on the buy side. So the first thing is something that has always been the case, but they are making sure that it is screamed from the rooftops, is that commissions are not set by law. They have been and always will be negotiable. I charge something very different than the person down the street, but I also offer something very different than the person down the street. So the fee that your agent gets paid, that is decided between you and them, and that's it. So whether this is something that you find obvious or not, that is a big focus out of the settlement of this lawsuit, is to make sure consumers know these are fully negotiable. The second change, and the one that is going to have the biggest tangible impact on how your experience buying a home actually goes, is up until this point, when a home was listed on the MLS, so actually listed through a real estate service, there was a section in there that stipulated how much are they paying the buyer's agent? How much are they covering for the buyer? The co-op fee, whatever the language was. This was important because then when you send an address to your agent and you say, hey, we're interested in this property, they can see right up front, this property, they're gonna pay my entire fee so you all don't have to. And that is a huge thing. Because as a buyer, this is another big determining factor whether a home is going to work for you or not, is you want to know, okay, that's an added out-of-pocket cost to actually buying this home, whereas on this home, I don't have to pay that cost. This is where us in Idaho, we've been doing things the right way for a while because it's always been the case here that as a buyer, you are responsible for your agent's fee. It just so happened to be the case that 95% of the time, the seller was the one paying for or offsetting a majority of that. This section displaying what that buyer agent fee would be was also available on Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, and that was a result of another lawsuit just about 4 years ago, where buyers were asking for more transparency about it. I was a huge proponent of this because regardless of what you and your buyer's agent have agreed to as their fee, it is important for you to know exactly what they're getting paid when that home closes. But regardless of if you think that clarity and that transparency was important, that is all going away. So that is the biggest change that is coming from this, is now starting this week, commissions cannot be mentioned in the MLS at any point. The goal of this is that it should take care of any sort of allegation of what we call steering. Steering is where somebody as an agent is pointing a buyer to a very specific home, a specific neighborhood, and not showing them everything that could work for them. So in the commission aspect, that's them looking at the homes that have lower commission and not even sending them to their buyer. Now, I want to be clear, that is not a good way to do business. That is not how I've ever done business and how I want to, but it was still important for us to know what that percentage was. When a client of mine sent me a home, I could pull it up, ask all the questions about what's important to them. We'll figure out when we're able to see it. I'll reach out to the listing agent and get all of that information. But this was also the time where I could see, hey, for this home, all of my fee that we discussed is covered. You don't have to worry about anything extra. Or they are subsidizing a big portion of my fee, and every once in a while too, they aren't paying any portion of my fee, so you all would be responsible for that. This was not me steering anybody towards those homes where my fee was getting covered, because again, here in Idaho, my buyer was already responsible for paying my fee for the work that I was providing. But the reason that they wanted to know and I wanted to know was that is a determining factor for a lot of people. When you're looking at two homes, this one is listed at $500,000, but they're paying your buyer's agent's fee. The seller is going to help you out with that cost. Think of it as them offering you a concession to kind of offset some of your closing costs in a way. But then you go down the street and this home is also listed for $500,000, but they aren't offering you any sort of help with your buyer's agent. As a buyer, one, this might just be more appealing than this one because it's a better deal. But also for a lot of buyers, paying their buyer's agent out of pocket at closing isn't on the table. Think about those first-time home buyers, the VA buyers, low-income families, the ones that are struggling to get every penny together to afford that down payment and those closing costs in an environment where our housing prices just keep skyrocketing through the roof. They have worked so hard to get to the point where they're at. They just don't have a chunk of change that they can take from their down payment to pay for their representation. And I would argue that these sorts of buyers who haven't been through the process before, they are the ones that need that representation even more. One of the biggest myths that I've heard people already start talking about is that this lawsuit is making it so that sellers cannot pay buyers' agents. And this is just flat out not true. Sellers are free to pay buyers' agents whatever they please. They can pay their agent whatever they please because again, the commissions are all negotiable. They can choose to offer to pay a whole fee. They can also choose to start not paying a fee. It is completely up to them. But regardless of what they choose, the buyer has to know. So with all of this getting removed from the MLS, kind of taking away all mention of commissions, how will you, as the buyer, know what to expect when we're talking about your buyer's agent's fee? And here in Idaho, they came up with a new form to address exactly that. This is going to be called an RE16B. That acronym you do not need to remember. Basically, this is taking the place of that same listing in the MLS offering X amount of compensation, but it is a document that the listing agent will have that will give you proof that, hey, they are going to be paying for a majority of my agent's commission on this deal so that you know going into it and making that offer, again, exactly what you need to expect. So next time you send your agent a listing that you're interested in, they're going to be doing the same due diligence up front, but they're also going to be asking, do you all have a 16B on file? If the answer is yes, great, give it to your buyer. If the answer is no, great, now we know it, and you as the buyer can make the decision on what you want to do next. And third, when we're talking about the big changes that are coming to the process of buying a home up here in our area, they really are starting to regulate very differently when we have to start to sign those official forms formalizing our relationship as agent and client. Especially when working with people who are out of state and relocating, the way that I've run my business for the longest time is we will form this, we will talk about all of the buyer agency, but a lot of times we didn't formalize that representation agreement until you were out here, you were seriously looking for homes, and we needed to formalize our relationship. This gave us a ton of flexibility. I could do everything that you needed me to do with video tours. I could show you things while you're here. We could meet with builders. All of this could happen while you're kind of in that exploratory phase of, do we even want to move to Boise or not? That is where I wanted your focus to be on anyways. I didn't want you to have to feel like, okay, do we want to commit to Chase or not? And unfortunately, that is one of the things that's going to be going away. One of the big requirements from this lawsuit is now, as agents, before we show any homes, we have to formally talk about buyer's agency, get a representation agreement signed, and talk through exactly what our fee is. Quick caveat for you. After filming, but before we're going to release this video, the state of Idaho actually released a new form that will kind of fit in here. They released a form called the RE5 that will take the place as kind of a placeholder document. If you want to go see a home with somebody, but you're not ready to commit to them being your representation, this RE5 will show you kind of all the things that you need to know. It'll describe what fees are and such. It is important to know this won't have any sort of agency relationship, but it will allow you to, again, see homes, but not have to commit to somebody. Again, like I said at the beginning of the video, I think a lot of these changes are going to be good. So us having this conversation up front and kind of getting all that formalizing stuff out of the way is going to be extremely helpful and will give us all a ton of clarity on what to expect. But I just want you to know that you should expect this a lot earlier in the process. And for those of you that are watching this and you're in the middle, we're getting you up here to Boise, Idaho, and we're doing a ton of video tours, you're visiting, we're doing all that jazz. Just know that it's time where we actually have to formally put it on paper that we like each other and we want to work together. So these next three things, they're really to be determined. The first of which is we're going to find out what percentage of sellers on the resale side are going to continue to pay a buyer's agent. How many of them are going to see this and they're just going to cut that portion out of their listing? Buyers, you are on your own. How many are going to continue to offer it? That is going to play a big role in you as the buyer kind of figuring out what you need to expect in each market around the country, because it will differ. And on that same front, especially up here in Idaho, new construction, they kind of lead the entire market. So we're all kind of sitting back right now figuring out, okay, how will builders react to this? How many of them will cut the commissions that they're paying? How many will stay the same? Same exact thing that I talked about on the resale side, but it'll be really interesting to see what they choose to do from here. In our area, we're already seeing a ton of the big builders still saying that, hey, we are going to help the buyers out and we are going to cover their agent's fee for them. A big portion of that is buyer's agents do a lot of work in the transaction that the builder, doesn't actually have to do now, but it also provides a really nice liability wall between the two sides. You are protected as the buyer a heck of a lot more, and that helps the builder and their agent not have any sort of dual conflict of interest sort of agency in place. For builders who are really doing a ton of business, that safety and security and not opening them up to that liability is worth its weight in gold. And lastly, we're not really sure how this is going to impact appraisals and home valuations. For the longest time, this has been a cost that's kind of been baked into that sales price. Now that that's getting taken out, how are we now going to judge a home that is paying a buyer's agent, but it's coming through as a concession? Whereas in the past, appraisers would look at sales price minus concessions, and that was kind of the net price. Commissions, though, they weren't listed as a concession. So you really didn't know where it was at when we were talking appraisals. Now that this is kind of changing that process and it will be listed as that concession, we're gonna have to figure out how are appraisers gonna factor these in? Are they gonna go back and kind of bring up to speed everything and what the commissions were? Are they gonna look forward and figure out how do we split out what concessions matter for value and what don't? And honestly, that could probably be a completely separate video, but there are a lot of things that appraisers, good luck to them. They have got a lot of stuff to sort out, so we're just gonna have to wait and see. Whew. That is going to be the majority of this video. I know that was a lot and it was much more specific and tactical than some of the stuff that we typically talk about. And I do want to be clear, this is just the starting point. If you have any questions at all about the lawsuit, how it impacts us, if I said something that you were like, I don't think that's actually correct, you want to talk a little bit more, you want to figure out how it actually impacts you, All of my information is down below. You all know, just reach out and I will walk you through this entire thing. And as a reminder, every single state is going to be so different. So if you're moving from another state, make sure you're getting that expert advice on the ground on how things have changed there as well, because you'll have to figure out both sides. And if you choose that Idaho just isn't for you, hopefully this was still a little bit helpful, because now you know you need to ask some of these questions of the agent that you're going to be working with in that new state. So again, reach out with any questions that you have. And if you watch this video and you learned something helpful, hit that subscribe button down below. That way you're the first to know everything you need to know about moving up here to the Boise, Idaho area. But until then, watch one of these other videos that's popping up, and I'll see you all on the next one.